Okay, you're good. You're good to go now.
Okay. Well, it's 7:03 now, and I'm gonna call this Transportation Policy Board meeting to order on Wednesday, March 9th. Let's start with some introductions. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. City of Olympia.
Good morning, everybody. Danny Madron with the City of Olympia.
Let's start with, let's do City of Lacey, Chair.
Andy Ryder, Mayor Lacey, your chair.
Tumwater,
Peter Agavi, Tumwater.
Thurston County,
Thurston County, Carolina Mejia.
and Rainier,
Ron Kemp, City of Rainier.
Tenino,
John O'Callahan representing the great city of Tenino.
and Yelm,
Brian Hess here representing Yelm.
and Intercity Transit.
Don Melnick, Intercity Transit Authority member. Good morning, y'all.
Good morning.
Hi, Don.
And our business representative,
Good morning. I'm Renee Radcliffe Sinclair, business rep.
and our community representative.
Devin Festinger, community representative.
And I also want to note that I see Commissioner Amy Evans from Port of Olympia has joined us this morning as well.
Amy Evans.
And, oh, our state representative. Sorry, Kevin.
Morning, everybody. Kevin Dragon. I come from the Department of Enterprise Services.
And Washington State Department of Transportation.
Hi, good morning, Steve Rourke.
And Steve, let's take a moment just because I think and this might be your first Transportation Policy Board meeting since taking on this role. And so folks might remember Steve's face because he's been with us before. But Steve, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit further?
Yeah, sure, Mark. Well, good morning, everybody. You probably saw John Winans at this meeting frequently in the past. He was the region administrator of Olympic Region for many years, and John retired back in December. I think it was December, yeah. So I've stepped in front of the bus, if you will, and enjoying being a region administrator here for WashDOT's Olympic Region. So looking forward to working with all of them. And Mark, we've worked together in the past, so looking forward to continuing that.
Yeah, and I think I may have mentioned we have worked with Steve in the past, and excited to have him as our region administrator. It's going to be a great working relationship. So thanks for coming this morning. And I believe that's it, Chair.
I believe we have an emeritus representative.
Oh, I'm sorry. How could I? Our emeritus representative.
Hi, good morning, Pete Kamat.
Thank you, Karen.
Do you have any announcements as well?
Would you like me to go through staff?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
Or-
From Intercity Transit, we have Rob LaFontaine, Jessica Gould, and Eric Phillips. From Olympia, we have Sophie Stimson. From Tumwater, we have Mary Heather Ames. From Thurston County, we have Matt Unzelman. And also from WashDOT, we have Gaius Sonoy. And then from TRPC, myself, Mark Daly, Director, Vina Tabbitt, Karen Parkhurst, Berlina Lucas, Dorinda Merrill, Paul Brewster, Theresa Julius, Berlina Lucas, and I think that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Do you have any other announcements?
I do. One thing that I wanted to mention is we had been working with our Technical Advisory Committee. There was an opportunity from WashDOT for federal funds for the Freight Highway Program and the National Freight Highway Program. This time around, they had 50 million to program over federal fiscal years 2022 to 2025. And this time around, they had the metropolitan planning organizations like us coordinate the application process. Pretty narrow in scope. It was only for construction related work that had a demonstrable improvement on freight movement. And so we only had one application. It was from Thurston County for the Tilley Road Bridge replacement. And council approved that project to go forward at their meeting on Friday. And so right now we're working with Thurston County to get the application in by the March 16th deadline. Another important note, on April 4th, our rural transit service, we're going to be moving one of the Rainier stops. So it's right closer to the newly paved lot on the corner of Minnesota and Rochester. And want to thank Rainier for their support in helping to move that rural transit stop. Right now, we're working on signage and perhaps looking at shelters and other areas where we can apply for some grant applications to just to improve the visibility and the usability of those rural transit bus stops. Thank you, Chair.
Great. And before we get started here, I would just like to call for a moment of silence for all those who've been affected by the war in Ukraine. This is really hits home in Lacey. We have a sister city in Poland that I'm very close to, who also has a sister city in Ukraine, and our sister city is taking in refugees and are dealing with a lot of pain and suffering. So before we get started, can I just have a quick moment of silence for everyone who's been affected by the war? Thank you. And with that, I actually have one change for today's agenda. I'd like to move the agenda item number 10 right after agenda item 7. So because they're the same topic, and so might as well put those together. And with that, can I get a approval of today's amended agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries. We have an amended agenda. Next up on our amended agenda is the approval of the meeting notes from February 9th. Can I get a motion?
Move approval. Tom Callahan, move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? And that motion unanimously carries as well. And we did not have anyone sign up for public comments. Do we have anyone signed up this morning?
We do not, Chair.
Okay. Then let's go right into the discussion of our hybrid meetings that we're going to hopefully start here in May. I'll turn it back over to you, Mark.
Yeah, just wanted to, I've had some questions from our council members and from Transportation Policy Board members about with the lifting of the mask mandate, when we would start to have in-person meetings. And what I'm asking council and policy board is let's look at May for that first in-person opportunity. We're still working out our new conference room and its camera system and such. And so that will give us a little bit more time to really dial in how hybrid meetings are going to work so that we can make sure we've got a really good experience for those in the room and those that will still participate online. And also, most of you have not seen our new office yet. And so this will also kind of serve as our office warming for Transportation Policy Board members. So we also want to give ourselves a little more time to get our office ready to go and ready for public consumption. And we're looking forward to showing it to you all because it's a great space for us. And we think that our meeting room is going to be a great space for council and policy board as well.
Does anyone have any questions? So it looks like not next month, but in May, we will be back together and hybrid for those who like to go that way as well.
Thanks for your patience on that.
Then next up is the Business and Community Representative Terms and Bylaws Ward. You can do the recruitment for the Business and Community Representative, wherever you want, whichever you'd like to go first, Karen.
Okay, so let's start with the amendment to the bylaws. As you know, we've been having some discussions about the terms of the business and community representatives. A couple of issues. One is that the bylaws state that these will be staggered terms so that we have continuity. What it really means is we're recruiting all the time. And so we would like to move to just having 3-year terms set for each of the business and community reps, and that would be just the standard. As we're starting to make some progress, but these are difficult positions to fill, especially now. And so basically what we're doing is asking for 3-year terms. They will not be staggered. And we, a few months ago, when we discussed the bylaws with you, when we were talking about another change, you asked that we move to they, them kinds of gender terms. And so we have also done that. So we are looking, this is first reading today. And so we're looking for you to have discussions on it, ask questions, and then hopefully this could be on consent next month.
You need an approval of the first reading?
No.
Okay.
Just need thumbs up, thumbs down that this works for you, or questions answered.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we've been having such a difficult time filling these, and I think it does make sense to go through the 3-year term as well. The old bylaws had 2-year terms, and that just doesn't really make lots of sense anymore either. So I look forward to these updated bylaws. Anyone else have any questions about it?
Okay, let's move on to recruitment then. On this, I'd like to report some success. As of this morning, we have 11 applications for the community representative. And so thank you for all your efforts. We've been really trying to get the word out to everyone, but we're not done yet, because as of this morning, we have 1 business representative application. So I'd like you all to go out now, today, and, wrestle your business. When you go to lunch, you might mention that we're looking for business representatives, or any other things you're doing in the community. We've reached out to the EDC, to chambers, to other business associations. And so remember, we are looking for diversity. We're looking for small businesses, large businesses, anywhere in the region. So first, I'd like to thank you for your help in getting the word out, and ask that you continue to do that. By the end of the month, we hope to have closed this process with more business representatives. We'll be discussing with the leadership of the council, of the policy board, if we want to go ahead and move forward on the community representatives, even if we haven't have enough applications for business representatives. So you'll be hearing more probably by the end of the month on where we're at. But go out there and find some business folks. Thank you.
Have you reached out to John Bourbon?
I don't have the list in front of me, and John.
The reason that I ask is because you guys will probably see him before I do.
Okay, all righty. We will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I heard a rumor that Mark was willing to give some Dancing Goats coffee certificate there if we can find someone and get them to apply. So
That's right. And Vina made sure that I noted with my personal funds.
Well, I don't think it was just to apply, but somebody that actually.
Yes, if it
ultimately
leads
gets
to a
appointed.
successful.
Exactly.
There was very specific language with that.
That's right. That's right.
So I'll put the word out. Everyone tries to put the word out, especially when you report out. If you're reporting out to your jurisdictions, can you, please say something and get someone to apply. We would really appreciate it. Is there any other questions? Okay, then let's move it along. Let's go right into the household travel survey.
So good morning. My name is Theresa Julius. I work here in the modeling team at TRPC. Today we are here to introduce you to the household travel survey we will be conducting this spring. The project is part of the Regional Transportation Model Update, as the survey will provide household travel preference. RSG has been hired to conduct the survey, and Abby Robinson is here to provide information on the survey sampling and instruments. RSG is a research and analytics firm with over 30 years of expertise in transportation data collection, modeling, analytics, and planning. Abby Robinson is a senior consultant at the company and has managed many travel surveys in the US, Canada, and Australia, including the past 5 years of household travel surveys in the Puget Sound region, as well as Skagit, Spokane, and Whatcom counties. I'm going to pass it on to Abby. Has she been made a co-host?
Yes, she has.
Thank you.
I think so. All right, thanks, Theresa. And can you all see my screen here that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, perfect. Well, thanks for having us here today. As Theresa said, we're just going to talk a little bit about the travel survey. So I'll get started here. So TRPC is conducting a household travel survey this spring. And as Theresa said, the goal is essentially to collect day-to-day travel information for residents in the South Sound region. The study will collect data from at least 2,000 households in Thurston County, as well as portions of Grays Harbor, Lewis, and Pierce counties. And the information is going to be used to inform travel demand model updates, provide insight into current travel patterns, and then also serve as a benchmark for future policy analysis. The study team is going to collect data via an online survey instrument, as well as a GPS-based smartphone app called OurMove, and I'll talk about that a little bit further later. We're currently in the planning phase of the project, and we'll collect data in April through early June of this year, and then we'll use the second half of the year to review, weight, and report the data. So a little bit more about the sampling area. So the map on the right-hand side of the screen shows the area that we're planning to cover in the study. So Thurston County has a sample target of 1,600 households. We have a target of 200 households in Pierce County, and then 100 households in each of Lewis and Grays Harbor counties. And you can see in the map that we've split the region into a few different sampling segments, we call them. And the segments are aligned with our targets and also our expected survey response from the different geographies. And to make sure that we can achieve the most demographically representative sample that we can, we've also included a few strategies in our sampling plan to engage groups that we know respond to surveys at lower rates. So for example, these strategies include offering higher survey incentives to hard to reach demographics and sending a higher proportion of invitations to the geographies where we expect lower survey response. So a little bit more about the actual invitations. So the study team has designed this branding scheme that you can see in the invitations on the right-hand side here. And the goal is really just to make these invitations as engaging and as applicable as we can to the population. So households are going to be invited to participate in the study via mailed invitations. We're going to include both English and Spanish text in those invitations so that we're being inclusive and allowing everyone to participate. Invited households that then complete the entire study will receive a gift card incentive. And we're doing that because research has shown across many regions that offering incentives helps us achieve a more representative sample, and it also just reduces the cost of the project by reducing the number of invitations that need to be sent. And as I noted in the last slide here, those hard to survey households are going to receive a higher incentive upfront so that we can encourage them to respond and get a representative sample at the end of the day. All right, so the best available survey technology has evolved a lot since the last household travel survey was conducted in this region in 2013. So this study is still going to use an online survey instrument like last time, but we've upgraded that instrument and also added an option for households to participate via a smartphone app. So this is that OurMove app that I mentioned earlier. The types of questions in both instruments will be the same though. So for example, we'll ask things like, where did you go? When and why did you go there? What travel modes did you use? How much did it cost? And really the difference between the two instruments is that the app will collect trip paths and times of travel automatically in the background as people carry their phones with them and travel throughout the day. Whereas those online respondents will need to enter those times and locations manually. Households that choose to report their information online will participate just for one travel day, whereas households that choose to use the smartphone app will report their travel for up to 7 consecutive days. So a little bit more about the app itself. So this is an app that RSG designed and has been used in many regions and internationally for the past about 7 or so years. We've used the same smartphone app for household travel surveys in the Puget Sound region, as well as in Whatcom, Skagit, and Spokane counties. And the app is really effective in that it reduces some of the burden for participants to remember all of their trips as they're reporting information during their travel period, because it collects all of that information automatically. And the reason that that's really important and useful is because if we're not asking people to remember all their trips, we're more likely to actually capture all of their trips. And that means that we get more accurate information at the end of the day for our data users. A couple other notes about OurMove. It uses minimal data while running, so it relies first on Wi-Fi so that we're not asking a lot of people for their data. It also is designed to limit battery drain as much as possible. If you've ever used Google Maps or other kinds of tracking tools, you know that those location apps can sometimes drain your battery. So OurMove is designed to do that as little as possible as folks are traveling. All right, and last item just to touch on here is a few more notes about data privacy. So of course, this study is going to collect a good amount of personal data. So we take our responsibility very seriously to protect that data. So RSG has aligned our practices to comply with the most stringent regulations out there, including the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, as well as California's Consumer Privacy Act. And that means that we follow very strict protocols for collecting the data, transmitting it, storing it. Data is never sold. Respondents can also withdraw from the study at any point if they choose, and they can also ask us to delete their data, and that's well within their rights, and we allow them to do that. And I think that is all that we had here for the presentation, but if there are questions, we're happy to help answer those.
Could you stop sharing your screen?
Let's see. I think I can hear. There we go.
Perfect. Anyone have any questions? Carolina,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you had said that you are going to give more incentive to households that are hard to reach. How would you define that? Is there a modality that you will use to identify those households?
That's a great question. Yes. So we're identifying households in a couple of different ways and at a couple of different points in the study. So when I showed that map with the different sampling segments, there were a few of those segments that were defined as hard to survey, which are basically geographies in which the census data shows there is a high proportion of households that are non-white, are limited English speaking, tribal areas, low income. And in those geographies where we have high proportions of those households, they will see in their invitations a higher incentive amount. They won't actually know that it's higher compared to other populations, but it will be higher. So that's one place where we identify people who are eligible for that higher incentive. The second place where we do it is when households actually start to take the survey. We ask towards the beginning of the survey about their household demographics. So, tell us your income, tell us, race, ethnicity, etc. And when we see them report in the survey that they qualify for one of those things, again, being low income, non-white, Hispanic ethnicity, then they would also qualify for that higher incentive. And the survey would tell them, thanks, you qualify for this incentive. Would you like to proceed?
Great. Carolina?
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions. My first question is, how does the data collected, represent impacted changes because of COVID? Especially because bus services, intercity transit is not running their full schedule right now, or people are teleworking more. How will those changes that have happened through COVID be represented?
Sure. So we've designed the survey to ask some information about, of course, what are you doing right now, but also some, what would you do after COVID, or what would your typical telework schedule be later on? I think we, of course, saw some changes in travel behavior during COVID. And even though, there's kind of this question about when are things going to return to normal, sort of the industry consensus in one of the conversations is that, what is normal? When is it going to return? So, even if ridership is lower than it might be, we don't want to wait too long to collect data. Having some data is more useful than having no data. But we will ask some questions in the survey to try and understand what are the differences now compared to what it might be later on.
Thank you. And can I ask one more question, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
My next question is in regards to the app, and how does the app work? Is it user friendly? Does it also have a dual language or multiple languages that people can use? And is it constantly tracking your location? And how's that worked in other counties, especially with older generations or maybe generations who don't speak that language?
Sure. So I'll try to answer those in order. So first, as far as whether or not it's user friendly, the app is definitely designed to be user friendly. It's been tested in many regions in the state of Washington, as well as other places in the US. So it is designed to be as easy to use as possible. Essentially, when someone is using the app, if they make a trip and the app recognizes, this person is moving, now they've stopped moving, so they've stopped their trip, a survey will pop up in the app. It'll be a notification that comes up, and it'll say, hey, we saw that you made a trip. Did you make this trip? Tell us a little bit about it, so that they can kind of answer things in small snippets throughout their travel period. So that's kind of the user-friendly side. As far as languages, for this study, we are planning to have the entire survey translated in both English and Spanish, so people can choose to participate in either language. As far as app tracking goes, our operating systems allow users to say, do you want an app to track you or not? Our Move will send reminders to ask people to enable their location services, which is what allows them to participate. So if they select yes, enable location services, then it is tracking them in the background during that travel period. So that's how the tracking works. And then I think your last question was about how the older populations or people who might not be as tech savvy participate. We give them the option. So if they're not comfortable using the app, they can still participate online. They can do the entire study. They'll still receive their incentive. It's just two options. We found in some cases that offering the smartphone app can actually make the survey more accessible to some populations. So for example, younger folks might be more likely to participate in a smartphone app survey. Similarly, some people who might not have, a desktop computer at home, they might still have a smartphone app, and of course they can still take the online survey through a browser in their app, but then they still have the app option. And I didn't mention it, I realize in the presentation here, but we also offer a call center option. So if somebody doesn't want to use the app and they don't want to do online, they can actually call a phone number too and participate in the survey that way. Call center operators will be using the online instrument, so all of the data comes into the same place, but there is that third option as well.
Any other questions? Let's go to Annie and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I assume that we're looking at surrounding counties because people obviously commute in and out of Thurston County. So how will you go about identifying people who are making that commute?
Sure. So we ask a few questions in the survey to understand where their typical work location is. And that includes, let's say some people, maybe they telework some days and they go into an office some days, or they, have an office that they don't go into all the time. We would still ask, where is your office location? We also ask during, when they're actually reporting their travel to tell us about their work trips. So if we see that somebody reports their home in one county, and then they take a trip and they report that their purpose is work and they end at their workplace or some other place, then we can identify them that way.
Okay. John?
Okay. Not quite sure how to ask this question, so if I'm bumbling, please excuse me. We have an inflation rate as of today, because the new numbers haven't come out, of 7.5%. That means that 93 cents of every dollar is what you actually get to spend at this point. Plus gas prices are driving through the roof. What's not being mentioned is home heating, and that's being driven through the roof. That's a lot of money that's being taken out of somebody's house for a household for travel. This is a very interesting time to be holding this type of a survey, this type of a travel survey, because people are going to be pretty much hamstrung. How are you going to be able to adjust and so that what we're seeing this time is actually reflective of what we can expect in the future? Because the last one was pretty close, and we did, I've been here for a while, and it's tracked pretty well. But we've got some really unusual stuff happening right now, and I'm not sure how well that's going to be able to track. Can you explain that a little bit? I know it's a lot.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Vina might be able to help our discussions. We definitely discussed this as a modeling team about when to do the survey, because this is part of the regional transportation model update, and that goes into the regional transportation plan, which has a timeline. So we definitely did discuss about whether this spring or waiting would do that. Do you have any, Vina, remember our discussions?
Yeah, I mean, Abby might be able to talk about the nuts and bolts, and we might have to do some waiting or that sort of thing, but we are always looking at what time to do this. We've held off for quite a while because of COVID, and we were hoping this spring would be a new normal, which it is looking like it is for COVID potentially, but now we have another situation. So I guess the question is, when is the right time, and how far can you put something off when you have to collect data to update? And we've made the choice to go for the spring, and then we'll try to make the adjustments if we feel like they're necessary, but we'll just be watching things as we move forward. Things just change week by week. And so,
Day by day.
Day by day. And when we made the decision to have it this spring, we certainly weren't foreseeing the situation we're under right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess it all sort of does influence how people travel, right? And so it's real information. Yeah, maybe it's based on different things, but it's definitely affecting how people travel. And I think it's good to know that. I mean, I think we'll all know that during this time, gas prices are at a historic high and may even be higher in the next by spring. We just do not know. And it will have an impact on how we travel. And I think we need to take that into consideration, going forward. First of all, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since the last time we did this. I remember that survey. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Yeah. And so I guess you're right. It's always going to be something. It's COVID and now it's, really high gas prices and high inflation. But sooner or later, we just have to figure out the data and start someplace. So I would, it'd be nice to put this off a little bit, but I get it. When you say spring, when do you think the first surveys will start to go out?
2035.
Our survey window is April 10th, I think.
April 8th is the
That's
Right.
is the soft start. Yes.
And through May, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll knock on wood.
And our 2 windows are spring and fall because we don't want to collect in the summer when schools are out. So there's timing for doing this. It's not like you can just put it off a month. You have to, there's kind of twice a year that you have opportunities.
And so we'll just have to take that into account, right? With
Yeah.
data we get in the spring compared to the data we get in the fall, there could be different things. Brian Hess from Yelm.
I believe Carolina had her hand up first.
Okay, Carolina.
I'm sorry. I thought of another question. My question's in regards to the location services. You said the app worked through Wi-Fi, and driving around Thurston County, there are some locations where it's dead. How does that affect? Does it just stop tracking at that point and then continue once it, you pick up back onto, once you're in service again, or how's that worked before?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think probably I can clarify a little bit what I was mentioning there. So the app will still track even if no Wi-Fi is available. We certainly expect that people are traveling around outside. The Wi-Fi comes into play for sending data back and forth to our servers. So that's we're not using up a large portion of if people have a data package, for example. We're not relying on that to send data back and forth. The app will still track even if they're not connected to Wi-Fi, though, in the meantime.
Great. Brian?
Yes. My question is, I'm trying to understand, we're going to be using this to help put together new bus routes, new forms of transportation, to try to get people to move around. And I understand, looking at the map, how you want to collect data. It's the number of participants that I'm kind of concerned about, because I'm wondering, are you going to be able to hit those individuals that, due to the past 2 years, the changes that all of a sudden moved out of Seattle, moved out of Tacoma, came down to Thurston County, came to a more rural area? How are we going to be able to get those individuals, because their transportation is a lot different than staying within Thurston County itself and some of those other things. I mean, it's things such as, I can speak, for example, of Yelm. There's only one bus that comes to Yelm. That bus stops at every stop all the way to the Olympia Center. And so if somebody wanted to do a trip of saying, hey, I work in Seattle, I live here, I want to take the bus, it's not feasible. And how do we get their voices? How do we get the ones who, for the next 10 years, might be willing to use public transportation, mass transit, so we can make adjustments and such?
So let me clarify how we're going to use the data first, Council Member. We are using this to update our travel demand model. So we're taking the input of the folks that we get the information from and using it as the basis for how we calibrate our model for how people travel. We're not trying to influence behavior. We're trying to capture how people are traveling today and put it in the model, and then have the model represent the conditions. And then we'll build a future model to see how that will look as well, making some assumptions. And then Abby, if you want to talk about sampling a little bit.
Sure. So thank you, Vina. So on the sampling side of things, the sampling rate, which is the number of people that we're hoping to capture divided by the number of people in the region, is actually to the higher end for this region compared to most household travel surveys. For this size region, most household travel surveys tend to have, 1% ish sample rate. And this region is going to be quite a bit higher than that. So in terms of then having confidence in that underlying data that will then inform the model and other kinds of uses, we feel pretty good about the number of households that we're currently scheduled to capture.
Are there any other questions?
I would like to thank Abby and Michelle for joining us this morning. And just a plug for our survey, where our survey instruments are going out in April. So if you receive an invitation, please consider participating and encourage your constituents to do so.
And if your jurisdiction receives any inquiries, please direct them to our website. We'll have links to the RSG website so people can get the information and get their questions answered. So thank you.
So, but this is going to be a more of a random survey, though.
It is. Yes,
right?
we won't be asking other individuals to take it. You'll be invited, although the invitation rate is quite high in Thurston County, very high, quite frankly. So,
Got it. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. And we look forward to going through that. Obviously, a lot has changed. I don't remember using the app function as much back in 2013. It was all.
yeah. I don't believe RSG had the app, and they were the firm that worked with us 10 years ago, but this is new. So hopefully we'll have better participation rate in more days. And we're very pleased with this, our working relationship with Abby and Michelle. It's been wonderful so far. So
Great. Well, thank you. Then let's go on to
Thank you.
our next
Thank you.
item, which is the state fiscal year unified planning work program. See you, Vina.
that is me. So I will share my screen. So I think you all know me by now, but I'm Vina Tabbitt, the Deputy Director here at TRPC. And one of the main responsibilities of the Transportation Policy Board is to look at our transportation issues within the agency. And our Unified Planning Work Program is the official name for what is really a transportation work program. And it lays out what we'll be undertaking in the next year. So I'm going to go through what we're doing and why, and then take some of your questions. And the reason why we're doing it, what are we doing when we're making policies and decisions and investments in transportation? Well, we're trying to keep our life cycle costs as low as possible and make efficient use of our existing infrastructure and services. In this region, we're trying to align transportation land use decisions, and we've been doing that very effectively for many years. We're trying to increase travel choices, the choices that are available to the members of our community, and minimize environmental impacts, and make our system safe for all users. In our work program, you received a very hefty document that, and that includes a couple different elements. The main one we're going to talk about, the two we'll talk about today, are the TRPC work program and the unfunded needs that we've identified. But there's also a little bit of a description of other federally funded planning studies, either through us or Intercity Transit or some of our members, and then planning activities of other agencies. The three agencies, or the two agencies there, are the Washington State Department of Transportation. We have planning activities from both their headquarters and Olympic region, the region that covers our area, as well as Intercity Transit. And the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, is meant to be a comprehensive look at integrated transportation planning in the region. That's why we're required to have all that information in there. So I'm just going to do a refresher on this. I think I talked about this a little bit last month, but we at TRPC have two designations for our transportation requirements. Federally, we're what is called a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the acronym is an MPO. And we also have a state designation, which is a Regional Transportation Planning Organization, an RTPO. We, for several years, have been planning to the same geography, which is the entirety of Thurston County, for both of these designations, and we integrate them completely. So this area in green in the middle is all the things that have to be done under both our MPO and our RTPO requirements, including things like developing our regional transportation plan, or doing public involvement, or doing annual reporting, or developing this work program. There are a few things that the federal government requires that the state doesn't. Performance measures is one of them. For those of you who've been on this board for a while, we've talked about federal performance management. We may be bringing some of those back to you this year, later in the year. And then on the state side, there's a few things that they require that the federal government doesn't, including, and Karen will be talking to you this, I think next month, a coordinated human services transportation plan, as well as comprehensive plan certification, ensuring that the local comprehensive plans are consistent with the regional transportation plan when they're updated. So within our work program, we've broken it out this year into 6 elements. If for those of you who were on the board last year, many of them are familiar, but it's being reorganized a little bit this year. And that only has to do mainly with how DOT is handling the money flow on their end and how we were able to integrate things a little bit more cohesively. So we have program management, project programming and tracking, ongoing planning and research, data collection, major initiatives, and then we've also got a category called contingency and carryover, for those things that are unexpected that we may choose to fund over the next year, or may have to undertake, and then some carryover funds in case the federal government shuts down, for instance, and can't give us reimbursements, that sort of thing. It's always good to have some carryover funds for our federal funds. So some of our key ongoing planning elements, I'm not going to go through all the requirements. You see those coming to you, things like the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan that Theresa heads up, or the call for projects that we've been talking about. I'm just going to talk about some of our ongoing planning activities here. This year, we'll have support for our Human Services Transportation Plan. We did receive some funding from the state for that, but we've heard loudly and clearly from you that you want us to do increased outreach on all our programs. So within our normal work program, we also have additional funding for outreach to underrepresented community members. We just talked about the household travel survey. While we have a grant to fund the household travel survey for the consultant portion, our staff time, and it is considered a role going through and kind of figuring things out on our end, will come out of our work program. We also are continuing to support I-5 planning projects. We've been working with the State Washington Department of Transportation for quite a few years on I-5 planning projects, and we expect that to continue, especially as they move into the environmental phase for the Nisqually Delta area, if it's funded through the state legislature. And another thing that we're going to have, we always are looking at census and census results, but we will have an effort to look at our census urbanized area boundaries. We're expecting to see those boundaries being released sometime in the spring or summer of this year. And then our staff will be doing reviews, syncing everything up, smoothing things out. And then eventually the governor will approve all the urbanized area boundaries for the state. Some of the major initiatives that are in this year's work program, we are planning to develop a plan to prepare for electric and alternative fuel vehicles. We've talked about this before, and we are expecting to start that this year. And the bulk probably, this work program starts in July 1, but many of these things are continuous over or multi-year. We will continue our update of our population employment forecast. Michael Ambrogi is the lead on the population employment forecast, with Allison Osterberg and Scott Carty as working with him on that. And the population employment forecast looks out to a future year. Our current year is 2045 as our current future year is 2045, and we'll go a little bit further out. And it syncs up with the Office of Financial Management's population forecast. And it is used not only for our local comprehensive planning, but also to for the future year of the regional transportation model. So this work program is split between our information services part of the agency and our transportation work program. We did talk about the household travel survey and how it's going to be used to update our regional travel demand model. And that'll be a very major initiative in the coming year. We'll be taking the results of the household travel survey as well as other data sources. We are going to be collecting some traffic counts in the spring as well. We have purchased some what's called big data from cell phones to get some origin and destination study, all sorts of different data inputs that'll be going into updating the coefficients or the kind of the gears within that household travel survey to get us an updated representation of how people are traveling. And that the regional transportation model is not only used by all our member jurisdictions for a lot of their transportation planning needs and project development, but it's also used for our regional transportation plan, and we'll be entering a cycle of updating that quite soon. We'll be completing the update of the regional trails plan. That's been undergoing for several years, and we're hoping to have that completed by the end of this year. And then we will be beginning the update of the regional transportation plan. The main part of the regional transportation update will probably occur starting a year from now, but we will be starting to take steps to begin the update next year. Last month, the chair asked about becoming a transportation management area. So I thought I'd give you a quick update on what we know. Frankly, it's not that much right now. We are still on the bubble of whether we're going to become a transportation management area or not. So just as a little bit of background, if our urbanized area, as defined by the census, reaches a population threshold of 200,000 or has reached a threshold of 200,000 at last census, then we will be designated as a transportation management area. If we were using our old urbanized area, we would be sure that we've reached it. However, this Census Bureau is redefining how they're defining urbanized areas, and it looks like they're shrinking them a little bit. And so I'd still say the jury is out on whether we will become a TMA or not. So it's one of those hurry up and wait. Think about it, but don't do anything because we may or may not. So what would happen if we were to become a TMA? And so they're telling us we'll know in spring or summer, which is suitably vague. So we could know tomorrow and we'll let you know once we know, or we could know in July. What would we have to do if we were becoming a TMA? Well, they talk about coordinated planning with state and transit agencies. We already do this. We coordinate very well with both our state and intercity transit partners. So I don't feel like that's going to be a major change. We will have to develop a congestion management system. That's really a approach to how we will deal with congestion in our region. With all the work we've been doing on our congested urban corridors and on I-5, I feel like we're very much poised to just get this done very quickly. It's really our philosophy on how we work, deal with congestion. So it'll include things like increasing transit, looking at telework and other travel demand management strategies, as well as construction projects and efficiency projects, the whole range of things that we do as a region. The one wildcard is something called a MPO certification. We've heard that that's quite difficult and a lot of paperwork. So we're getting some more information on that when we meet with our federal and state partners later this month and make sure we are ready to check all those boxes. But we'll have a few years to get certified if we become a TMA. And then finally, there are changes to funding and funding distribution. We will likely receive, if we become a TMA, we'd receive direct allocations of the Surface Transportation Program and our Surface Transportation Set Aside, or what are called TAP program. We just don't know if it'll change the amount and if it'll actually change anything, because the way our state works, we already receive allocations there. There are some programs that we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years that have come through with our different things, like the Highway Improvement Program. that a lot of the funding only went to the TMAs because of the way the it had to. So we'll see. We won't really know much about that. We're hoping to know more about all of that in April. The wild card there is the new infrastructure bill. A lot of wild cards in this change, a lot of stuff happening. And with the new infrastructure bill, there's just different thresholds and requirements and different programs. And so a lot's changing. And so we'll learn more about how that all works. But it does not only affect us, but it also affects transit funding. So funding for intercity transit through the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. So we're working on finding out what may occur so we are proactive rather than reactive. Okay, and then finally, I want to talk about unfunded needs. So in the back of our Unified Planning Work Program, we identify unfunded needs. All of the ones I'm going to talk to you about today have been in for several years. And I do want to say the list was much longer 2 years ago when I brought it to you, and we are checking them off. So I feel really thankful for that. And we haven't actually been adding new ones. So the ones that we have on here, we have a high capacity transportation project underway right now. There's $500,000 currently in the state Senate transportation budget set aside for another phase of that. We'll see if that continues through and what that might fund. And if that doesn't get funded, our current study will identify next steps, and then we'll know if we want to shape up a phase 2 from there. So there's a couple irons in the fire there. We have a freight, goods, and services mobility strategy. We have identified that project, and you all approved that project as a contingency project should our region receive additional redistributed funds this summer. So there's a chance to get it funded through that. We are also going to submit the project for a highly competitive raise grant. We put it in last year. We were not successful in receiving it. And so we're going to resubmit that at a different dollar amount to meet the minimum of the raise grant. And so we've got 2 places where we're looking for funding for that project. Then we've got a regional multimodal level of service. This is something we've talked about for a few years. We're hoping to finish up once we finish up the trails study, and then this would be something that we could undertake if we could get it funded. I will say the state, and I've been sitting on their stakeholder steering committee, has been working on updating the state level of service. And of course, Olympia has done a lot of work around a multimodal level of service for the city of Olympia. So there's a lot going on both sides there. So it's really timely to be looking at that at a regional level. We also have a transportation recovery strategy. With all the flooding that our region underwent in the last month or so, it's very timely to be thinking about that again. And so we have that identified as an unfunded need. We also have a countywide bicycle and micromobility strategy, really looking at what is that core network for bike facilities through our region. And once the trails plan finishes up, we'll have staff who could undertake this. We could get that funded. And then we also have a neighborhood center study. If you remember when we were talking about the call for projects, one of our goals was to have more of our population locate near urban centers and neighborhood centers. Well, the flip side of that is encouraging the neighborhood centers that we have in our local comprehensive plans, because they're very difficult for private entities to get in there. So we need to look at what can we do as public entities to maybe supporting infrastructure, that sort of thing, to make them more viable. And that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? No, I'm seeing none. So looks like we still have a lot on our plate, but
always,
as always. Anything else from Policy Board? Okay.
So the next steps, this will be reviewed by our federal and state partners later this month, and then go to council for their review, and then their adoption a month after that.
Great.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go on to our state legislative session update. Back to Karen.
Okay, thank you. So as you may know, we are in the last 2 days of session. Tomorrow at 5 is supposed to be the end of the 2022 short session, and it has been very busy. I'm going to start by looking at the priority issues that we took into the session. And once again, I want to be really thankful for the policy board and the council in really narrowing the number of issues that we took to legislators. It made it much easier to have the communications. I'd also like to thank the folks that accompanied us on the visits to legislators. That would be Chair Ryder, Renee Radcliffe Sinclair, and Clark Gilman from the council. And so we had good meetings. We've had additional meetings with them as we follow up on details. So one of the first issues that we were interested in was broadband, and looking at funding, looking at working through community coalitions to make smart decisions in how we use the money. And I would like to say that so far we've been very successful in that. Several bills have passed the legislature. We're waiting to see what all is in the budget, but we're looking at some low interest or interest-free loans or grants. We're looking at kind of this definition of what is broadband, what is being connected. And I think that was really important, looking at the kinds of formulas that both the state and the feds are looking at in deciding what is service. In the past, it was like they either have it or they don't have it. Now we're getting a little more nuanced in talking about what's the speed, what's the cost, what's the real availability. Do people have devices in their homes to connect? And is there education involved in helping people to connect when they do have those connections? So we know that in our community, the private sector has not necessarily wanted to serve certain areas because there's not a lot of users. And so this whole public-private partnership, it has been moving forward quite well. And so let's see, again, that definition. I want to talk about the other pieces were transportation that we were looking at. And our transportation focus was on I-5 to continue to look at our next steps in the area around the Nisqually bridges and the additive transportation budget. That was the 16-year package, did include $75 million for the Nisqually bridges, as well as $25 million for commute trip reduction, another like transportation demand management kind of piece that we're looking at. That one has had a lot of conversation in the last few days. There was a lot of pressure because some of the funding for that bill came from taxing out-of-state recipients of gas that is refined in our state. And there was a lot of pushback about that. And so several of the other suggestions have been, I hate to be cynical, let's sweep the Public Works Trust Fund, has been something that the legislature has been want to do. And so that's there too. We will see. I have been scrambling around trying to get copies of the conference committee reports on the budget, and I haven't yet. There will be they will be signing those bills at noon today, and I don't have what those are looking like. So I'm continuing to try and scramble around and find those. In the Senate supplemental transportation budget, we were surprised that there's funding, as Vina mentioned, for a high capacity transportation study, including ferries, coming directly to TRPC. And the chair of Senate Transportation reached out to us to say, we would really like to see this move forward. We also know that in looking at the I-5 work, if indeed we're coming to a point where we're replacing the bridges, then we want to make sure that we have also considered other strategies that include what does rail look like in that corridor? What does other high capacity transportation like more express transit look like? What about the HOV lanes that support transit? So lots of thoughts about that. So that's our two big bills. I don't quite know yet. Hopefully by the time we do the after meeting summary, we will have information about those bills. So I just wanted to talk a little bit. I also wanted to mention that in the supplemental budget, there is funding for complete streets, preventive maintenance, safe routes to school. Both versions of the budget have bike and ped safety. There's a real recognition of the data over the last year and a half, 2 years about a real increase in accidents and fatalities, especially in people who are more vulnerable in riding their bikes or walking. There's also electric vehicle infrastructure and a Main Street program. So hopefully the bills will come out intact. And then I just want to talk about a couple of bills that I think might be of interest to you. Funding for seismic safety grant program for schools. So looking at how can we retrofit our schools for emergencies such as earthquakes. Traffic safety, it allows jurisdictions to establish 20-minute speed limits on certain areas, expands the use of automated traffic safety cameras. And so sort of gives a little more local control to saying, this is what's happening in this place on our street, and we need some help with it. You also remember that we had folks from the Trucking Association come and speak to us, and it was really about having no place to park and no place to use restrooms. And so there have been several bills that have passed the legislature that really dealt with trying to solve that problem. It also looked at rest stops on the highway. We've had to close several of those because of vandalism and a number of issues. So really trying to have those open again. Concentration on tribes in two different ways, which I think will be interesting to look at, which is tribal participation in planning under the Growth Management Act, as well as school districts, schools working toward a government-to-government agreement with the tribes. And so I think that will be interesting. We will hear more at noon about the bill, House Bill 1099, that improves the state's climate response through more connections between climate issues and the comprehensive planning framework. Still not passed is transportation benefit districts. You know, there was a court case and other things that took funding away from those who had, those communities who had set up transportation benefit districts. That has not passed yet. Kind of a local issue, talked about the deadline for port commissions when they want to raise from expanding from 3 commissioners to 5. So that sort of had Thurston County's name on it. I was interested to see that a bill that has passed the legislature is the Interbranch Advisory Committee, which is supposed to foster cooperation and communication between the 3 branches of government. And as we all know, there have been lots of struggles in the last few years with does the governor have too much power when it comes to emergencies? How can we be working together more? And so I think that will be interesting to see. Greenhouse gas emissions in public facilities has passed the legislature, appliance efficiency standards. So making sure that people, when they're buying appliances, that they have some assurances about energy efficiency. Let's see. We also saw a lot of bills about housing and homelessness. While that was not one of our major issues this year that we brought to the legislature, we were very clear when we met with legislators that it was still important to us, but we just weren't focusing on it quite as much. And I was interested to see that a number of the bills around housing and homelessness dealt with people who are coming out of foster care, people who are aging out, people who are coming out of prison, people who are coming out of mental health treatment, and what happens next, in an attempt to have some interventions that help people when they're making that transition. And then I think that's about all. As I said, we'll know more at noon about the transportation bills, but I think we've had a successful session. I think that, again, we are seeing that having remote sessions has allowed for so much more comment from the public, who don't have to take time off or hire a babysitter or drive across Washington State to come and testify. But we also see a lot of interest in the legislators in moving into a hybrid situation so that people can be there. I'm sure if I could be up there bugging people, I would know exactly what's in those budget bills. But now I just have to wait till noon like the rest of the people. So questions, comments?
Questions, comments? John, and then we'll go to Brian.
Okay, one of the things that's been relatively important to me over the last year and a half or so, knowing that by 2035, all of the major car manufacturers are going to be producing just EV vehicles. You were saying something about the EV infrastructure. I'm not so much worried about infrastructure. You know, you over at the mall, they've got infrastructure for a few cars. What I worry about is capacity. I hear nobody saying anything about increasing the base load so that as these cars come online, they actually have the ability to charge up. And I'm not seeing anything along those lines.
There's a little bit out there happening. People are admitting that our energy grid is not sufficient to deal with all of this. I don't think we quite have an answer yet, but I was hearing it more in the conversation this year. I don't have specific legislation that says, hey, we need to do this. So
okay, thank you. I got it.
Brian?
Yes, and this is just because my newest career happens to be in the freight industry as a professional driver with CDL. Yes, there's a lot of things going on, and I'm wondering for the Thurston transportation policies, if we can work on trying to alleviate some of these issues that they have. I mean, if none of you who are involved in the policy making, if you don't understand what a commercial driver goes through in reference to how their time operates and all, a traffic jam ruins it for them. Everybody complains about that they're not getting the goods, the transportation, the supply chain is ruined, but yet traffic adds a huge amount to that. If we can try to work on some things, and also just want to share as a driver who travels between Washington and Oregon, I can tell when I hit a Washington highway very easily. It's little things that occur. Lanes become a little bit thinner. As they put it, the rest stops, yeah, all of a sudden become infrequent places for us to stop. And so it might be something that as we progress forward, that maybe we start taking those things into consideration as well when looking at designing the transportation system.
And I just want to comment on that really quickly. When Vina Tabbitt just went through the Unified Planning Work Program, one of the unfunded needs she talked about was that freight and goods mobility strategy, and we couldn't agree with you more. That's why we've been trying to get this funded so that we can have some dedicated resource to comprehensively look at movement of freight and services through and beyond the Thurston region, because there are a lot of issues that associated with that freight movement that we could use some dedicated time to look at.
Yeah, and the freight parking one is one that we talked about. In fact, we need to get back to this, but I had reached out to Chair Ryder as well as our EDC folks, Economic Development Council folks, to talk about, is there some kind of creative way we can look at freight parking and facilities for freight in a new way? Because truck stops are not always what people desire in certain communities. And so I think a conversation, even if it's a small one, we need to reconvene that conversation after session and talk about what we can do in the short term. Yes, we should keep looking for funding, but are there issues at the local level that we can help with? You will see parks, trucks parked on freeway, on ramps and off ramps, and that's not how we want to treat these important folks in our community. So we're going to continue to look at that. We also have the worst truck parking in the country in Washington State as far as availability.
Don?
Thanks. Thanks for the update. Just to respond to what you, John, were concerned about, electric capacity. The Utilities and Transportation Commission in this state regulates private utilities. Would it be possible for them to sometime in the future to brief us on where things stand? I mean, I'm sure that concern is one they share, and it might be worthwhile when there was time permitting to have us briefed just on what's happening.
Okay.
It's a good suggestion. I see your hand still up, John. You still have something?
Yeah, I raised it again. One of the things that I see that could be a really big help even here in this weather is e-bicycles. As was back in 10, I think it was, that I actually got to go back to Virginia Beach, where I spent a lot of my college days. I actually remember some of them. This was the first place that I saw an e-bike. They have a governor system on there where they're only allowed to do 25 miles an hour at best. If you look around Thurston County, most of the major roads that we have here that are on the slower line are either 30 or 35. Is there any way that we can suggest that governor be lifted a bit? If so, that would make it a whole lot more palatable for somebody to use an e-bike to get back and forth to work. And those things are heavy duty enough so that they could actually go grocery shopping and pull 4 or 5 bags worth of groceries back home with them, that kind of stuff. I know it's got to be done on the legislative level, and this is the first time that I'm bringing it up here. I brought it up with other people before, but this is the first time I'm bringing it up here. Maybe it's something that we can actually take a look at and maybe get behind, especially
Mark,
with prices now.
You want to give an update?
Yeah. So I would love to talk about this as the chair knows. This is first I'll also point to that Unified Planning Work Program, some of our unfunded needs. There was that bicycle and micromobility strategy, and in a little more layperson speak, it's that recognition that there are small electric vehicles that are making it easy for anyone to travel at, between 20 plus miles per hour. And that's a real viable alternative when you start getting to those speeds. And so I'll talk about myself. I have an electric bike. It assists me. I still have to pedal and work, but I can pretty easily go 25 miles per hour. As you say, John, then that makes it now I can go to the store, I can go to work. It is a viable alternative. And so that's why, and I know you're talking about higher speeds, but I'll also say on a bike, when I'm consistently going 25 miles per hour on our current system, at times that feels pretty unsafe, because especially vehicles aren't used to a bike consistently going at those speeds. And so especially when you're driving right along traffic, it can feel pretty unsafe when a car doesn't realize how fast you're going. And so therefore their reaction times and such to you, they're not used to seeing you come on them as quickly. And so we really want to look comprehensively at our whole system and be visionary about how can we make some space for these alternative transportation options that we've never had before. And then when we really have an opportunity to look into and plan for that, you could talk about, well, now maybe let's have them go faster than the 25 miles per hour. But I think we need to look at the system of how those are going to move around and where, so that we can get a good handle on it for our region. And I hope we can get that work funded in the not too distant future.
Just a suggestion, like I said, it was back in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Virginia Beach County went through every question that you just brought up shortly after I left there. So you might want to give them a call and just reach out and see how they've handled it. And the speed, the 25-mile-an-hour speed, Mark, believe it or not, I used to be able to do 60 miles an hour on a 10-speed bicycle. It never scared me at all.
One other thing I'll mention is this is something that we've been talking about in relation to some of the I-5 work, as we're looking at potentially doing construction activities and work along the I-5 corridor. Is this an opportunity to look at that corridor for something like a high-speed bicycle lane, because one of the other issues is on our current trail system, at times going at those speeds isn't safe for the other users. And so is the work that's going on I-5 an opportunity to look at how can we have kind of bike highway lanes where for higher speed electric propelled micro mobility devices like electric bikes, like the e-scooters. And I hope that we can build some of that into this I-5 work as well.
We've had some conversations with the chair of Senate Transportation, who has agreed to work with us on this during the interim. So we're trying to get the word out that we're interested in this.
Yeah, just one more comment, because I see Pete has his hand up. Thank you, Pete. One of the things that I have noticed since the first time I ever saw one of those bikes till now is that we're going through a generational shift where people are getting used to using them, just like electric vehicles. We're starting to go through that generational shift. So this might be a really good time to help push that along. Thanks, Pete.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the other side of that, which Mark mentioned briefly, and that is that we have seen some complaints from people on the Chehalis Western Trail where people are flying by on electric bikes. And so, I think we got to be cautious about if there is a governor system, and I don't even know if there is on those bikes, allowing people to go even faster, because there have been some it is real startling because they're very quiet and they can sneak up on you. So, but it's a good dilemma to be in, the fact that people are out there using these things. So, I think it's an important discussion that we have.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
Well, and a lot of the discussion that we've preliminary had is looking at a separate sort of corridor to separate the lower speed trail users and the higher speed corridor users. And where we've been talking about is that it would all this work we're doing along I-5, if we don't include that sort of corridor, we are being very short-sighted, right? Because I do think more and more people are going to start using these, and it needs its sort of some separation there. And the trail that's coming down I-5 that will connect, down the Squally over to DuPont, all the way through that corridor. And so we should continue that corridor up through Thurston County. It makes a lot of sense. We just need to start the planning process and talk about it. 'Cause we know it's coming, and it would be crazy not to plan for it.
The only thing I'd add to that, because that's what I was going to say, and I also think we've got such a unique and powerful resource already in you mentioned the Chehalis Western Trail, the Tenino Rainier Yelm Trail. Is it possible to add on to those or to partition some of the existing so that we can have that separation between high speed and the walking and lower speed bikes and such, so that we can make it that viable transportation corridor and keep it safe for other users as well?
Anything else?
I could, but we'll leave it.
Let's go up to the outside committee reports to Danny.
All right, time for both a legislative report and outside committee report. Well, for one, I'll be really interested to hear from folks, like what is useful for me to share from attending the Puget Sound Regional Council meetings. It's funny because the next meeting is tomorrow, so the notes that I have are kind of a month old. But they did go through their set aside funding for rural town centers and corridors and the transportation alternatives program. And they did move that along for public comment and have some really good investments there. They also went over their transportation work program, which includes their core functions as an RPO, process improvements that they're looking into, and implementing the regional transportation plan. And a couple of things they focused on there was access to transit, coordination between jurisdictions, looking at roles, responsibilities, and best practices, priorities for bicyclists and pedestrians who need to be able to access transit, and also transit needs for people with special needs. And then also with equity, they talked about their plan to evaluate the outcome of the project selection criteria, which is something we should consider too, because we're looking at that for our own programs here. And they're also going to be doing an equity analysis of their TIP. They have an equity pilot program that they funded with a set aside, and they're also working on a dashboard around equity. And then they reviewed themes from their public comment on their regional transportation plan. And no surprise, they get a few more comments than we do, 35 in that whole big region up there. They also did some focus groups with people who, through the survey, indicated that they wanted to be more engaged and focused on lower income folks, BIPOC folks, just to get some more granular information about people who are often underrepresented in public comment and surveys. And that's my report.
Oh, great. I think that was a great report. Really appreciate it. And with that, we have reached the end of our agenda. So if there's nothing else from the policy board, without objection, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Undebatable motion.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you all.